A lot of the time, as people grow their business, not just in painting, but in really any business, the thing that people think they need is not necessarily the thing that they do need. A lot of the time, people think that they just need more leads, right? But oftentimes, not always, but often, needing leads is a symptom of a bigger problem. You know, if you do need to increase the sales in your business, leads will often help. But unless we initially address the fundamental issues within your business, more leads will just be solving a symptom instead of the root problem to why your business isn't growing. So, what is your constraint? Let's start there, right? Number one, in terms of finding out what your constraint is do you know your data? Do you know the numbers that your business is made up of? Because if you don't know your number, you don't have good data in your business, you're just going to be guessing at what your constraint might be.
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe.
What's up, everybody? Mike Hickman here, founder of paintergrowth.com, and you're listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. And this is another solo episode from me coming at you live, radio DJ style with no guests, and I have a really fun topic for you guys today. And this is, as you probably saw from the title, the theory of constraints. Basically, what is a constraint in your business? How do you identify your constraints, and how do you use this to figure out what's holding you back in business? Basically, in business, there's a reason why you're not growing, and there's always a reason. And the theory of constraints is just to help you figure out what that reason is. So hopefully with this podcast episode, you can kind of look at your business and think about it and figure out what your constraints are and hopefully resolve them. I have some ideas as we go through this, the various constraints of like what, of how you can solve some of them. And basically it's, you need to decide ahead of time, like how big do you want to grow your business? And then what are the constraints that you're going to see now and ahead of time, on that journey to business growth. So what is a constraint? A constraint is a limiting factor in your business. And what we really want to do with this video is help, or with this podcast is help you figure out what your constraint is, or like your limiting factor, and really attack it full on and make that not a constraint anymore. A lot of the time, as people grow their business, not just in painting, but in really any business, the thing that people think they need is not necessarily the thing that they do need. A lot of the time, people think that they just need more leads, right? But oftentimes, not always, but often, needing leads is a symptom of a bigger problem. If you do need to increase the sales in your business, leads will often help. But unless we initially address the fundamental issues within your business, more leads will just be solving a symptom instead of the root problem to why your business isn't growing. So what is your constraint? Let's start there, right? Number one, in terms of finding out what your constraint is do you know your data? Do you know the numbers that your business is made up of? Because if you don't know your number, you don't have good data in your business, you're just going to be guessing at what your constraint might be. Now, data, that's such a broad question, right? Or broad statement, broad thing. So what type of data do we actually need? What are the important numbers that we need to be looking at in our business to help us identify what those constraints are? So what data do you need? Average number of leads per week or per month. And if you're driving or something, like you might want to revisit this and like write this down. It's kind of important. So you know what I'm actually going to do? I am going to share my screen because I think Spotify really likes it when you guys watch the video. So here's the constraints. So number one, do you know your data? Then what data do you need? So here's kind of the data that you need to take a look at to make sure that you have a good understanding of. So average number of leads per week or per month, lead slippage rate. So conversely, your estimate conversion rate. What percentage of your leads do not turn into estimates, right? You need to know that number. Your close rate or your sales rate, obviously important number. Average job size, pretty self-explanatory. Some people have big jobs, some people have little jobs, and everywhere in between. So if you take the last 30 jobs that you've produced, divide that total production number by 30. What was the average revenue per job, right? Some are going to be huge, some are going to be small, but doing it this way is going to average it out. Then we have charge rate. Charge rate is a really important number. A lot of people don't calculate it, but basically after you complete a job, what was the average hourly charge out rate of each painter that was on site? So if it's a $10,000 job and it takes 100 hours, you take 10,000 divided by 100, that's $100. That's $100 per hour charge rate. We'll get into that in a second. Right now, we're just identifying the numbers, and then we'll get into what they should be and how to kind of fix those various constraints. So your average gross margin. So on average, what is your gross margin per job? And your gross margin is your basically how much is left over after paying for paint and materials. And then we have under gross margin, average labor percentage, and average material percentage. And then a few more things: productivity per painter, so hours produced per week, not hours per week, hours produced. And then how far are you booked out? And then how productive are you? What does your time look like? Less of a number, a little bit more subjective, but we can get into it anyway. Essentially, if you know all of these numbers and you know the things that you need to do to impact these numbers positively or negatively, you really should be able to move those constraints out of your way, right? Like everything from not enough leads to close rate to production to profitability. If you can impact those constraints, on demand, those no longer become constraints, right? But it's about knowing what those constraints are so that you can actually impact them in the future. Now, what if you don't know any of these numbers? So if you don't know any or very few of these numbers, all that means is that your eyes are now open to the metrics that you need to get an understanding for your business in order to move it forward. So if you don't know those metrics, instead of like trying to solve one or fix a constraint, maybe start putting together some tracking dashboards and spreadsheets to start to understand your numbers. Oftentimes, once you start tracking various metrics, those metrics will improve just because you are tracking them and paying attention to them. But as long as you're not tracking them, it's going to be very difficult to make objective decisions based on your business. And you don't need to master all of these numbers overnight, but we do want to work towards having a solid understanding of them, what they look like in your business, so that you can make better decisions for your business. Now, what should your numbers be? So we went through all of those metrics. Let's take a look at what those numbers should be and some potential problem solving. Leads per week. Okay, so the first one, this one's kind of difficult because in order to understand your leads per week, how many leads you need to know your goals, right? And so it's a reverse calculation there. So if you want to produce 83,000 a month, which is $1 million a year, and you have an average job size of $5,000 and a close rate of 33% and a 20% lead slippage rate, then the math is as follows. 83,000 divided by 5,000 is 16.6 jobs a month, or about 17. So 17 jobs at a 33% sales rate is 51 estimates per month, 52 estimates. 52 estimates at an 80% lead conversion rate is 65 leads per month. And I like to divide my monthly numbers by 4.3 to get my weekly averages. Basically, we need to get 15 leads a week. So we can reasonably assume that if we get 15 leads per week based on these numbers, that will allow you to book about $83,000 per month on average, right? But again, now that this, the 83,000, which is our lagging indicator, meaning that if our leading indicators, our number of leads, our sales rate, and our close rate are all in line, that will allow us to hit our lagging indicator, which is $83,000 per month. If we get 15 leads per week each week, but we don't book $83,000 a month on average, well, now, as long as we track the numbers, we can see where that problem occurred. Was it in our lead conversion rate, right? Did we not do those 52 estimates? Did we do fewer estimates, even though we got the 15 leads a week, right? Or was our sales rate lower? Or was our average job size lower? So based on your constraint, looking at the data, you can now problem solve your business. Now, the next one, lead slippage rate. So this number can vary based on lead source, right? Depending on where you get your leads from, your lead slippage can be higher or lower. For Facebook, lead slippage is usually a little bit higher, meaning that lead quality is a little bit lower, maybe around 50%. And lead slippage would be a lot lower for Google ads. They're typically higher quality from Google ads, maybe 10%. But on average, you should shoot for about 25 to 30% lead slippage. If it's any higher than that, then you should be working to improve this metric through optimizing speed to lead nurture, estimate reminder processes, things like that. Right, a lot of opportunities to improve that lead slippage rate. The easiest is probably speed to lead. So is there anything that you can do to get to your leads quicker? I always recommend getting a text message notification as soon as the lead comes in. Next is close rate, right? So close rate. So if your close rate is not at that, in that example above at 33%, if you're selling below that, then that's a constraint. Now we need to see if we can solve that. Close rate is not a number that exists in a vacuum, meaning there's other factors to consider. The three main factors that impact this is your pricing, your sales ability, and the quality of your leads. Now, if you're closing less than 20 to 25%, then you should consider improving sales process, ensuring your pricing is accurate by looking at your charge rate and your competitors' quotes, or seeing if there's a possibility to improve the quality of leads that you're getting. So let's keep moving. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is average job size and what you can kind of do to impact that. Now, I'm going through a lot of things really quickly. So if anyone wants me to do a deep dive, if you want me to do a deep dive into a specific one of these, then just answer in the Q&A in Spotify. If you're listening on Apple or YouTube, just go over to Spotify, answer in the Q&A in the first, I would say 7 days from when this is released. And I can look at what you think, what kind of the responses are, and I can put together a little bit of a deep dive on any one of these topics that you want. So average job size can certainly be location and business dependent. So the numbers that I'm going to share aren't necessarily like specific for any reason, but I needed to use some sort of placeholder numbers. And typically, this is just typically, not always, but typically, the larger the average job size, the better or healthier the business, all else being equal. If we can increase our average job sizes while maintaining margins and productivity, then we're going to have less logistics, moving around crews and equipment. I mean, I would much rather have a $10,000 average job size than a $5,000 average job size, just way less logistics to handle. Again, assuming you can maintain margins and productivity and profitability and things like that. The numbers are fairly arbitrary because there's so much variance, but if your average job size is say below 4,000, you should consider working on the two skills that you basically have to be able to increase your average job size. One is going to be upselling and your sales ability. So just being a better salesperson, finding unique and novel ways to sell additional services to these same clients, maybe better products, a new service, other services like, oh, we're going to paint all your walls. Once we do that, your ceilings are going to look a little bit yellow. Did you want me to do a separate quote for the ceilings? Right. So upselling and then potentially finding more affluent or better areas. All right. Charge rate. So what is charge rate? We kind of went through that a little bit earlier, but basically, $10,000 job divided by, in this example, 120 hours, that would make an $83 an hour charge rate. So your revenue of a job divided by how many hours it took. You don't need to be operating in a piece rate system in order to utilize this number, but I do recommend that everyone get on some sort of piece rate or performance-based pay with their painters as quickly as possible. This is going to allow you to really manage your margins and your profitability and your productivity a lot better. So I implore you, get to some sort of piece rate or performance-based pay as soon as possible. A little coffee break action there. So you should aim to have your charge rate around between $75 an hour and $95 an hour. This gives your business enough room to keep gross margins around 50% while paying your painters well and providing enough leftover profit for the business to operate and grow. So problem solving, charge rate. If your charge rate is too low, meaning you're down in like the 50s or the 60s or even low 70s per hour, basically you just need to increase your prices. You need to increase the prices. And as you increase the prices, if your close rate goes down, then you want to go up, see close rate, problem solving to work to improve that, quality of leads, sales ability, things like that. Next, gross margin. Is this a constraint in your business? So your gross margin is a percentage that's left over each job after paying for your materials and labor. You want to aim for about a 50% gross margin, meaning 50% of your job is cost of goods sold. So if you're less than 50% gross margin, meaning your costs are too high, there's a number of possible solutions. First, look at your labor and materials. What percentage are each of them? Paint should be 10 to 12%. Labor should be 34 to 40% with in-house painters, 1099s, or sorry, W-2s, and 40 to 50% should be labor if you're using 1099s. So what should you do if labor is higher than those rates? So number one, you can increase your pricing or your charge rate, right? See the previous section. Or you can improve your painter productivity. So get them to paint faster by developing skills, or pay your painters a smaller percentage of the job by moving them to a piece rate system so that they're more motivated to get it done. Now, it might ruffle some tail feathers if I say pay your painters a lesser percentage of the job. There is a fine line between, paying your painters, paying your team well, and overpaying your team for a job that is just not worth that much. And if we have painters that we've had around for a long time that have a lot of tenure, it can be easy to overpay them because they're reliable and they might be worth it. That's also important too, to determine how much work are they actually doing for you over and above actually just painting. Are they just painting contractors, or are they also are they just painters, or are they also doing things like production management, setting up jobs, closing jobs, or responsible for quality? If they're responsible for things like that, then paying them a little bit more is valuable. But in general, you need to be keeping your labor around 34 to 40%. So what if paint is higher than those rates? So number one, you can negotiate better paint pricing with your rep if you have a few products that you like to stick to, or if you let your paint rep know that you're going to be sticking to a few products and you have some solid purchase history, you'll have some ability to negotiate lower pricing. You can potentially use more affordable paint, check out different paint stores. More affordable does not always mean worse. Don't mean bottom end, but there are some ways that you can experience cost savings. Teach your painters to become more efficient with their paint and their tools and their sundries. This can be done through training, education about the cost of materials, as well as having a bonus structure tied to material costs. So if they can keep paint below a certain percent, then they can potentially get some bonuses. Next, productivity per painter. So productivity per painter is a metric that's not used as much as it should be. It can be a great indication to show how efficient your painters are and how much money they're making you per week and per month. And it's easiest to track by crews. So if a crew is always together, it's difficult to track each painter's individual productivity. Instead, you'll just track the crew's productivity. So to track productivity over a week, you'll use how much money was produced by that crew, divided by how many hours they actually worked. This will give you actual charge rate for their work week or month, or however time period you're doing this over. And then compare it to your company's average charge rate and get a percentage. So for example, if a crew of 2, and there's a little bit math heavy here, so anyone listening, just like open up your podcast and take a look. So if a crew of 2 produce $6,500 in 1 week, and they each worked 36 hours, then that would be 72 hours of total production, equating $6,500. And if you take that $6,500 divided by those 72 hours, that becomes a $90.27 per hour actual charge rate. So if your average charge rate is $85 per hour, then the ratio is 90.27 divided by 85, or 106%, meaning they produce 6% faster than average. And you can use this to bonus painters as a quick way to include performance pay if you're concerned about moving to piece rate immediately. Basically this is just productivity, and you'll quickly be able to see whether or not painters are being productive. Instead of, there's 2 ways to do it. You can either compare the actual charge rate, in this case, the $90.27, by your company's average, or if you quote your jobs with like a budgeted hourly type of rate, you can compare just directly to what the budgeted hours or budgeted charge rate was. So if the budgeted charge rate for that job was $85 and they completed at $90, then the calculation is the same. If the budgeted charge rate was $100, just for whatever reason, and they completed it at $90 an hour, they're actually behind budget. And then 2 last ones. So next one is weeks booked out. So how far are you booked out? If you're booked out more than 4 weeks, then you need to hire more painters. Simple as that. If you're on the tools all the time and you don't have any time to recruit, then you really need to take a step back from painting. Take the short-term hit to your finances by stopping painting for like 20 hours a week so that you can find a painter, instead of making $50 an hour for 20 hours 1 week, which is about $1,000. use those 20 hours to find a painter who can make you $50,000 a year, right? So if you do the math, those 20 hours that you spent not making that $1,000, $50 an hour, will now bring you $2,500 per hour, or 50 times more impact than painting for those 20 hours, right? If that one painter can bring you 50,000 a year profit, and you can do that in 20 hours by finding that person and bringing them on, that's a 50x more impact with your time than just painting for those 20 hours. So I hear painters all the time. They tell me, I don't have time to recruit. I'm way too busy painting. My customers are so demanding. I have so much work to do, so much to paint. I just don't have time to recruit. Well, that is your fault because painting is not very productive for you in terms of how much money you're making per hour in your business. What you should be doing instead is taking that time, spending it on recruiting. Like literally, if I was in that situation, I would not paint for an entire week. I would move my production schedule. I wouldn't paint for an entire week. I would spend 40 hours recruiting, and I would find 2 painters or 3 painters to come on my team. And the following 2-3 weeks, I would just been training them up to my spec. But if I had, 2 or 3 months worth of work booked out and I was just painting all the time, I would take a week off painting and just recruit full time. I hear people all the time tell me that they're booked out for like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And in my opinion, this is not a flex. All that tells me is that you don't know how to logistically grow a business. You don't know how to recruit. You don't know how to scale a workforce. And so if that is you need to start recruiting as soon as possible. Now, the final one, how to your time and effectiveness as a constraint. And so this one is a little bit harder to isolate, but if you're finding yourself too busy during the day, oftentimes getting bogged down by reactive activities instead of being proactive, then you likely have some work you need to do on your personal time and effectiveness. So I think I've talked about it on a previous podcast. You want to check out my priority management training, do the time study, see where you're wasting your time. Oftentimes we end up putting out fires instead of empowering our painters to put out their own fires. So we just solve their problems instead of enabling them to solve their own problems. Some fires need to burn, right? Other times we do low impact activities because they're easier, we like them, or it's just easier to do them rather than to create a system and delegate it to a team member. Right now, this is the wrong mindset and attitude for your business. For you as a business owner who wants to scale significantly, you need to shift your mindset and realize that you cannot be the bottleneck for any aspect of your business. Not immediately, but eventually. So that means right now, as soon as possible, and continuously try to offload those low impact activities and tasks in your business to your teammates, create systems and processes around them so that you can focus your time on higher leverage activities, higher impact activities in your business. So use this constraints training, this podcast as a starting point to figure out which numbers you should track, how to track that numbers, what good numbers should look like, and how to initially problem solve them. The solutions presented in this are quite broad strokes, but throughout the rest of this, I hope that you can come up with detailed solutions to each one of these. So I hope that was helpful. We went through a lot. I went through really quickly. As a reminder, again, if you want me to do a deep dive on any one or multiple of these, if you're like, I'm not sure how to track this, or I don't know how to problem solve this, just go to the Q&A section of this podcast episode in Spotify, put a comment there, and I will be sure to make a deep dive video for every single comment that gets posted there. I'm not even kidding. You post a comment on one deep dive that you want to learn from this video, I 100% will post a deep dive to every single comment that gets posted. So go into Spotify, do that now, figure out what you want to learn more about. And I hope this was helpful. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.